We're going to do the three-man weave today with two of my favorite people in basketball, Kirk Goldsberry and Brandon Payne. I don't really need to do a big introduction. If you're following me or if you're reading my stuff, you've already read and heard about them and studied them. Kirk Goldsberry, who's a professor at Texas, he's written Sprawl Ball and also this week Hoop Atlas that he has so generously sent me an advanced copy of. And I've already poured through it and read front to back. It's outstanding. Congratulations, Kirk, on another outstanding book here. It is the mapping the remarkable transformation of the modern NBA, and it is so fun, dude.
Thank you. And I'm glad to hear you say it. I'm proud of it. It's beautiful. We have some incredible illustrations by my friend Aaron Dana. And then we have some really cool chapters with a lot of charts, believe it or not, and a lot of words. But I have to say my favorite chapter, and this is not blowing smoke, is only made possible by the third man in this three-man weave, Tommy.
Yeah, that's right. Brandon Payne. That. He's a man who's traveling the world right now, trying to get his gospel spread to the masses. In this chapter, I got to tell you, Kirk, like Brandon Payne, this had to have been your most fun to write because there's so much in here that is reporting, like stuff that you really nerd out if you really want to know what makes LeBron great, Michael Jordan great, Dirk Nowitzki. You have chapters on each of those guys. But this Steph Curry, you get under the lid. You get under the you kind of get to see exactly the work that gets put in. And it's all thanks to Brandon, who kind of pulled back the curtain in this. And you got to see kind of like this mastermind of angles, geometry, spacing, the clockwork. I don't think I've heard of the clockwork yet, but thank you, Kirk, for bringing it to my attention, and Brandon for I think inventing. Did you invent the clock? Like, forget this NBA drill. You invented all the 12 hours.
Yeah.
And all that.
We've got an interesting story about that we can talk about a little bit later. But yeah, that the clockwork space creation was something that I came up with to try to help Steph understand, exactly what we were trying to do in terms of reading defenders and creating space and creating difficult closeout angles.
And Kurt, what makes Steph different? Like, you wrote a chapter on, the icons, but what made you so excited to write about Steph and talk to Brandon about him?
Well, when you write about the transformation of the modern NBA, Tom, you talk about Michael Jordan, you talk about LeBron James, and arguably the most influential player of the last 10 or 15 years is Steph.
Yeah.
And what he's reframed conventional wisdom in pro basketball. And I got to know Brandon a little bit, just totally casually, like 5 or 10 years ago. I started sending him some shot charts, and he invited me to a practice in Palo Alto. And I didn't know I was going to be like writing a book about this stuff. And I went and watched them work out. And I've been to a lot of basketball practice like you have, Tom. But it was the most innovative, unusual workout I've ever witnessed. And of course, I'm watching Stephen like shoot threes in a 1-on-0 environment. And I'm just like blown away. It's like watching Babe Ruth in like 1925, like take batting practice. It was like, it's just awesome. But given the chance to tell people how Stephen practices and why he became this transformative electric shooter, it became a passion of me and probably the topic of the best chapter of this book, Tom.
Yeah, Noah. There's gadgets in there. There's also the nose, which I don't think, Kirk, as you're writing this book, I don't think you realize at all like how important the nose is in basketball until you go watch a workout. Like, of all the things on the human anatomy that you're like, oh, you got to really pay attention to this. Like, Brandon, explain why the nose is so important to basketball.
Well, the reason that we pay kind of attention to it, because wherever your nose goes is where your weight is when you're defending somebody. So, I mean, if your nose gets to the right side of your body, that's the side that you're the heaviest on. So that's one of the things that we read in terms of how we decide which hip we attack, which way we space, whether we space at an angle, whether we space directly back. That's one of the tells, just because it's letting him know which side the defender is heavier on. And typically the side the defender is heavier on is the side that's going to be the most difficult for them to flip their hips to. If you're heavy on your right leg, it's easy for you to open your left hip and create, an angled close or an angled defensive positioning. But, just understanding just really the anatomy of the body and how it works and how guys change directions and how guys handle their weight is so important to guys that are handling the basketball and having to make quick decisions. And it's not always, I think that everybody has this kind of misconception that it's about how much space you create. It's really not about how much space you create. It's about creating difficult closeouts. So, if I'm creating difficult closeouts and I know that a guy doesn't get his hands up very quickly and I know that he gets heavy to one side or the other, he's already given me two of the answers right there. I know that I'm going to be able to get a perimeter shot. Okay. And I know where I'm going to be able to get it from. It's the guys that stay very balanced. It's the guys that stay at an arm's length away, and guys that are active with their feet and their hands. Those are the guys that are more difficult to read. But you find in the NBA, especially as the games go on from first quarter to second quarter, third quarter particularly, you find that game plan discipline and understanding personnel and the game plan that they had coming in to defend, you find that gets less and less and less effective as the game goes, as fatigue sets in, and as game trends and circumstances start to take shape. But knowing where the nose is and knowing where their weight is really where it all starts. And once you learn how to read that, then the rest of it is kind of just up to your skill set and up to your ability to make decisions, which of course we work on all those things, but it starts with understanding where you're going and why you're going there.
Yeah, Kirk, you wrote a lot about in this book about how Michael Jordan kind of created space with the fadeaway jumper, how he was known as a dunker and then kind of revolutionized that a guy his size could dominate a game from that far away from the basket. And there's layers to Steph Curry. It's not just that, he came out of nowhere. There's what I enjoyed so much about your book, Kirk, is that you did like a chapter on Michael and then layered it on top of that, the Iverson Mountain, showing about like how Allen Iverson was able to get basically any shot he wanted using his handles. And now as I'm hearing Brandon talk, you kind of call back to the answer and how the defense gives the answer every time down the floor. And Kirk, you wrote a lot about that. Did you see similarities in Stephen Curry's like handles and then like Michael Jordan's ability to read the defense? It's all kind of coming together in this like smorgasbord of influences with Steph Curry. Cause yeah, the answer literally is Allen Iverson, but also the way that Steph is reading the defender that Brandon is teaching, it's kind of bringing all those, icons together in Steph Curry.
Yeah, and that's sort of the process we wrote about in Hoop Atlas is the modern NBA is really just layers upon layers, almost like geologic layers of influence, starting with Michael making jump shooting so powerful and winning MVPs as a perimeter scorer later in his career. And then Allen, I think everybody likes to rag on Allen Iverson because of his efficiency and stuff. But when you talk to players like Stephen or James Harden, or you talk to Russell Westbrook, you don't get a lot of hemming and hawing. And certainly, Tom, you know this, they don't talk a lot about win shares when they're talking about the greatness of Allen Iverson and the influence of Allen Iverson. I think the combination of Jordan's jump shooting, the handles that Allen really challenged NBA players to develop and perfect, the Euro step that Manu really popularized, that's the kind of sort of geological layering that we're talking about when we talk about the evolution of the modern NBA. And I think the best thing that Brandon Payne and this chapter really helped me with, and I wanted to bring to our readers, is it helped me understand Stephen's greatness a little bit more. And putting all this together, Hakeem Olajuwon read the defense, and they had incredible footwork diagrams and sequences based on the way the defender in the post would be leaning against Hakeem. Kevin McHale, that stuff's not new. What Brandon was able to do with Stephen, in my opinion, was sort of invent a new vocabulary and bring some of these concepts out to 30 feet away from the basket to take the wisdom of Allen Iverson, which at this point, it wasn't given a lot of credibility, but let's face it, it deserves it, in creating shooting space for the greatest shooter of all time. And I always say, Stephen is more than just the greatest shooter of all time. Those handles remain underrated, not by us three, but by a lot of people. It's a huge part of his game and his conditioning. And Brandon puts this into such great perspective. In the third and fourth quarter, the dude deserves so much credit for looking like the most fit athlete out there. And a lot of his biggest moments owe to the simple fact that he's in such great shape. But ultimately, like I said, Brandon made me watch Stephen Curry and appreciate Stephen Curry at such a higher level. And I hope I could bring some of that to the readers with Hoop Atlas, Tom.
Yeah, Brandon, heart rate.
Yeah.
We've talked about that and like conditioning and consistency, right? Like Kirk, you talked about how they want to hit the bullseye on the Noah machine. You move back and forth trying to make sure that he hits the perfect swish in the center of the basket. But Brandon, as we've talked before, you're really just trying to create consistency across a lot of different coverages, patterns of defense. And it just seems like all of this is trying to make sure that Steph, no matter where he is on the floor or how the defense is guarding him, he can get a good look and be able to recalibrate in the air and just make sure things are as consistent as possible. And that there's a lot of ways you can do that.
Well, yeah, and a lot of it has to do with understanding that there are multiple reads that are made, not only in terms of on-the-ball defenders, but that's got to be your first read. You're also reading what's going on in terms of the help. You're reading time and score. So there's a lot of things that are happening in these situations that lead to the ultimate decision that's made. So, we have to do things in his workouts to recreate game-like conditions in terms of having multiple reads to make at one time. So the way we do that is we add additional stimulus combined with decision making to what is the primary objective, which is to handle the basketball and get a shot. So we're trying to put him in game situations, and we talk about heart rate. I'm not huge on low heart rate shots in the off season. We do try to elevate his heart rate to close to what his game would look like. But we have to, we have to make sure we're doing that without putting additional mileage on his body. So there's a lot of planning. There's a lot of thought that goes into how we do that to keep him performing the way he performs in games without wearing his body down in the off season, but still getting him up to higher heart rates, getting him in game-like situations where he's got to make decisions.
Yeah, Kurt, I got to imagine you've seen some gadgets and technology and augmenting NBA players, but Brandon and how he utilizes it. Can you explain not just what Brandon does, but also across the NBA and your experience with the Spurs? How important is technology and leveraging that in a positive way? Sometimes it kind of is overkill, or people just use a gadget because they want to check it off a box. But what are some of the ways that you've seen, Kirk, that Brandon uses that is pretty unique?
Yeah, I think the Noah sensor is the one I want to zero in on here, Tom, because the Noah sensor, let me do a quick description of for our listeners. It's a sensor that hangs about 13 feet above the basketball hoop, and it measures where the center of the basketball passes through the 10-foot plane. So I always say this, the Noah sensor takes us from a simple balls and strikes framework to a more precise pitch location framework for where the shot passed through the ring, and even made shots are imperfect. And it helps us understand that. So very precise data about where the basketball landed, what its arc was it deep in the ring? Was it left? Was it right?
And the degree, right? There's a degree angle that it tells you.
The arc of the shot, Tom.
Yeah.
And that's why it's called Noah, by the way, which I didn't know for an embarrassing amount of time. Noah, building the perfect arc. I did not ever know that. Tom just had the realization.
Tom just figured it out too. Tom just figured it out as well.
I was like, what? I don't get it. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, but it's been helping players for a long time. And what I've seen, almost every NBA team has it. And Brandon knows what I'm about to say. Almost every team, a lot of college teams have it. The women's college basketball team at the University of Texas has it. What a lot of teams don't do is know how to use it and employ it. And one of the things that I was struck by with Brandon and Stephen is that these dudes use it. The guy was already the best shooter in the world. And he said this, what is this thing? He had the curiosity. What is this thing? How can I use it? How can I use this thing to get better? And to me, what makes Stephen Curry great, and one of the things I've learned from Brandon, is that curiosity, that competition in him, and the dedication to his craft. And so when confronted with a newfangled thing, a lot of shooters, and I can name names, get that out of here. I don't want data on that shot. I don't need it. Look at where I am already with myself and my career. And there are NBA superstars that have that attitude with the Noah sensor. There are shooting coaches that have that. But one of the things that I think defines the Brandon Payne, Stephen Curry relationship is how can we find smarter ways to make practice better? And the Noah sensor, and I'll let Brandon talk about a few ways they use this sensor to take even a swish, Tom, from 30 feet and get upset about it.
Not good
get upset about it.
Yeah.
And it's crazy.
It's ludicrous.
But it's helped Stephen go from level Illuminati 1, as you like to say, to Illuminati 10 over the course of these last 10 years.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of ways you can use technology, right? And you're right. It's how you implement it and what you're doing that's so important. Or if not, you're just using things for the sake of using them, but the Noah and a lot of the technology we have just has such great purpose to how we work. And we make sure that we don't let the technology bog the workouts down. We make sure that we're not working out just to use it for the sake of using it. So, one of the things that we do that I enjoy with the Noah is we shrink the target. So, whereas a couple of things that it does, it gives you how far right, how far left into the ring that the ball enters. So we typically shrink that down to Steph can only be 2 inches off center to the right or 2 inches off center to the lleft. If he's 3 inches off center on either side, we count it as a miss. You can also,
it's crazy.
Yeah. You can also, depending on where we're shooting from, sometimes he has a tendency to be short or long. So
wait, just for some context, Brandon, just for some context, because not everybody knows this. The ring itself is 18 inches wide, and shots that deviate 4 to 5 inches can still be swishes in some cases.
Yeah, those can still swish. Yeah.
So what he just said is it has to be a bullseye, and it's 28 feet away, or it doesn't count. Stephen can't move on to the next station or the next shot unless he hits the freaking bullseye.
We only count shots between the twos. Yeah, we only count shots that fall between the twos because you get audible feedback. So on every shot, after the ball is released, after it goes to the rim, it's telling you -3, -4, +1, +2. Anything minus is left. Anything plus is right. 0 is a bullseye right down the middle. And we can tell, not only do we use it to shrink the target, but we also use it to understand when we're starting to hit diminishing returns in terms of his workouts. So once he's very consistent in terms of hitting a specific spot, once the ball, even if it's going in, starts to spray a little bit around the ring, we know we're starting to hit a fatigue point and we need to start to taper the workout down because we're getting to a point to where we're getting into a fatigue mechanics, and we don't want to create mechanical issues by continuing to work past where we're working at peak levels. In terms of shooting, now that doesn't mean we stop working out. That just means we take what we're doing from a shooting standpoint down to not introduce fatigue mechanic patterns to what we're doing.
Yeah, Brandon, you said you're going to use or you're going to go to workout, Steph, on Monday, I think you said. Any technology there that you want to give a shout out to that you're excited about?
Not this week. This week is we're just getting back in the gym and getting the basketball in the air and starting to work towards Paris. So it's a very old school type setup.
There is some technology though. I know this. Maybe I'm not. The Molten Basketball is loathed technology. As somebody who spent some time with Team USA, Tom, the Molten Basketball is the FIBA ball. Not the favorite basketball of many NBA players. So, Brandon, are you guys going to be using the Molten Ball this week?
You just spoke to my biggest job this week. My job this entire week has been finding 4 Molten FIBA basketballs in the Bay Area us to use. Myself and Eric Housen with the Golden State Warriors are working to make sure we have Molten basketballs to use Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday next week as he shoots. So, yes, that will be the new technology that we're introducing. And believe it or not, it is a very big adjustment when you go, because that you get so used to shooting that NBA basketball, then you have to change. It's a different texture. It's a different, a whole different setup. Even the channels are different. It's got a different channel setup. So the ball feels a little bit different in your hands. So that is something we have to work through this week. And I feel pretty confident he'll be fine with it after a day or two of using it. But yeah, that's a big part of what we're doing this week.
Yeah. I remember Noah, the machine back in like 2012, I think it was. I was introduced to it because like LeBron would yell at Dwayne 45 at the free throw line. Mm-hmm. And like he would get in his ear and be like 45, 45. And in the middle of game at the free throw line. And I'm like, oh, there's a story. I would wonder what that's about. And Dwayne had explained like, yeah, we have this like machine that screams out degrees of angles like at you while you shoot free throws. And I had been really struggling with my free throw. And we figured out that my like optimal angle on my free throw is 45. And when I miss, LeBron just hates it and gets in my ear and just screams 45, 45.
Yeah.
And like, it is amazing when, we talk about analytics, Kirk, you felt this kind of like pushback from some players who like it's a stigmatized word. It feels like an outsider who's trying to infiltrate your sport and create something totally foreign and redefine the language. But oftentimes, like with Brandon, with Steph, they really love the numbers if it like serves them and if it can actually like confirm, sometimes deny or refute something that they believe. But Dwayne loved the player tracking data, Kirk, about his how much gravity he had off the ball. And like when he was off the ball, guys would cling to him, and he was so annoyed by it because he's like, I'm not Ray Allen, I'm not Steph Curry, I'm not Klay Thompson. What is going on here? And why are they defending me off the ball so closely? And I asked him that, and we came to the conclusion that it was because of his off-ball cuts, that like his ghost cuts when he would cut backdoor players, if they shaded off of him and kind of like took their eyes off, he would be gone and it would be an easy bucket at the basket. So like their time, and when D-Wade, when I said, I have some analytics for you, he's like, get that shit out of here. I don't want to hear analytics. But then when I explained what I was getting into, he was like, oh, I love that. And I'll serve it up to both of you guys. Like, Kirk, is there a moment when like analytics, maybe just marketing it that to an NBA player is probably a bad idea, but is there a moment when like the numbers, you had a player or a coach, you brought it to them and it kind of rocked their world, that they were like, wait, you can do that, or you can track that, or you can tell me that? Because I've had multiple moments like that, and it makes me feel better about the work that I do, that it can actually like teach you something.
Yeah, the charts were really important for me to bridge a lot of gaps. And for whatever reason, people take visual analytics or charts or maps a lot more seriously or differently. And some people are really good visual learners. And I know Brandon appreciated that. In fact, that's why he first reached out to me a long time ago. But it's that same Heat team. I remember when I was at Grantland, I went in 2013. The first NBA player I've interviewed was a guy named LeBron James. And I brought down some shot charts. And the first time I showed it to him, it was just a plot of all of his shots. And he's like, yo, that's some unique shit, man. I've never seen anything like that. And then we went through his evolution as a scorer, Tom, from his time as a young player in Cleveland and into the Hakeem era, where he'd sort of stopped shooting threes and worked on his post game. And I was showing him what that looked like on these shot charts. And it clicked, and we had this fantastic conversation that opened up a lot of his thoughts about his own game and his teammates. And I would show him Ray Allen, I'd show him Dwayne Wade. But for me, like it's proof that, visualization works for some of us at a very high level, and changes the conversation when you put things on a basketball court. I know Greg Popovich or RC Buford would respond more favorably than if you were on a spreadsheet. And so I think you have to be a really strong communicator, and you are, Tom. And when you can break a concept down like gravity and take the word analytics out, I've stopped using that word almost entirely when I'm talking to players or teams. Stats, intelligence, ideas, evidence. But these are all sort of good ways to get into a player's head. But I think that's one of Brandon's strengths, is to bring some super nerdy concepts that he gets from the readings about skill acquisition or skill development, and translate them to NBA players at a very high level that makes them comfortable and makes them buy into these concepts. It's not a minor part of our job as analysts, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think that it's really important to understand who you're talking to, which players you're talking to. And you have to understand that when you're in a coaching or a teaching position, they don't have to know everything that I need to know to do my job. They need to know we have to filter the information to them. We have to make sure that we're presenting the information to them in a way that both helps them understand that you're trying to make them better. You're trying to give them more information, but also they have to have the ability to be accountable. And I tell players this all the time. The hardest thing for players at any level to do is to look in the mirror and be honest about what you don't do well, and be honest that you need to improve in certain things. And I always tell them to make sure when you look in the mirror, you say you don't do something well yet, because you eventually will get there. The information that the tracking and the data can give us can help you get there faster. And you have to build that into what you're doing with them. And you have to make sure you're communicating effectively with what they need to know, not what I need to know. And so like Stephen is a guy that wants all the information, but I still don't give him all the information, because I know if I give him certain things, it's going to live in his head and it's going to adversely affect how he plays. But
what is an example of that? Is there an example of when that happened that you were like, man, I wish I didn't say it that way? He's like,
oh yeah, absolutely. Specifically as it relates to him coming downhill on the right side of the floor, shooting wing threes, coming from the top down on any sort of like a split action with the split action moving up. The ball, I'll get into it now. The ball typically travels left on him. And so I harped on it a little bit too long. I talked about it a little bit too long. And then, he got to the point to where it's not that he didn't want to shoot it. I would see him kind of hesitate. I was like, damn it, that's my fault. There's things that you have to make sure I filter. But for players to not want to use the technology, to me, it's silly. We have all this stuff that is in place to help you, and it's in place to help you be a better player. And help, quite frankly, at the NBA level, it's in place to help you make more money. It's here to help you.
That's the number they want to hear.
If you tore your ACL today, you would not want the doctors to treat you the way they treated players in 1990. If you tore your ACL today, you want every advance in medical technology available to the doctors to help you get back on the floor faster and better than you were before. It's the same thing with our tracking technology and the analytic technology that we have. These are things that we have in place that can help you get better faster if you will embrace it. But if you continually push back on it and you don't want to be accountable, it's like flying in an airplane with no radar, no GPS. You're doing something. You're going somewhere. You don't exactly know where you're going. You're going somewhere, but there's no way to really tell you how much better you're getting. With the tracking data, whether it be heart rate tracking, whether it be the stuff that things like Catapult give us in terms of max speed and distance traveled and heart rate, versus your NOAA data telling you how accurate you are shooting, how accurate you're shooting at elevated heart rates. These are things that are designed to tell you where the holes in your game is. And if you use that, the information creates your development roadmap for you. But if you continue to push back on it, you're going to be working on things that may or may not affect you in games. So they can be upset and they cannot like that people are looking at numbers and looking at charts and looking at graphs. But all that stuff, when used properly, gets them where they want to be faster, which is to more money. And so that's how I present it to them.
Kirk, you've got the campaign against the corner three shot. Can you explain?
Stop that,
Kirk. Can you explain the corner three crusade against the corner three? Because as a Spurs guy, I would have said, Kirk loves the corner three, but then I remember Pop hates the 3-point shot. So even though he employs these things, it's kind of he hates that he has to use it. And So the corner three shot is something that you've written about in this book, about how the Spurs and Matt Bonner and Bruce Bowen kind of figured out, wait, this shot is closer. It's also harder to guard. And it makes things easier for Tim Duncan to attack when he's got, this guy pulling the gravity away from him and making those tough decisions that we always want to see in offensive players. But you're writing that this has gotten out of control. It's not basketball anymore in your sense.
It isn't, but it's been a long and tortured relationship I've had with the corner three that starts. The corner three wasn't in the vernacular, Tom, when we started really watching basketball. Nobody said that, and now it's 1 in 10 shots in the NBA. So we've gone from Mike Breen never saying it 20 years ago to Mike Breen saying it 15 times a game, 25 times a game, and my relationship with the shot has changed over that time period. It went from the mascot of analytics and smartest shot in basketball, Bruce Bowen beating Kobe and Shaq and ending their three-peat with it in 2003 is a huge part of how they finally overcame that legendary Lakers team in San Antonio, to a point where every trip down, we have two guys sitting here in the corner on both sides of the court. They're just stationary. It's smart. It's thinning out the defense. But should that shot even exist in the first place, I remind you, the arc is about 23.75 feet everywhere from the basket except near the corners where it's 22 feet, which is a shorter distance, 22 feet, than, say, the women's college basketball three-point line is right now, and FIBA. And do we really want the best shooters in the world able to shoot a three-point shot that is a shorter distance than men's college basketball or women's college basketball? I think it's foolish. I think it has brought too much of a certain thing to the NBA at this point in the mid 2020s, Tom. I have changed my stance on it. And if the league is if the league is really
analytics folks, like, or people who work in stats, like I think we get the impression, or we give the impression sometimes that like what we believe is some sort of like Bible, that we can't actually change the scripture or change our opinions on certain things. So applaud you for responding to new information.
Yeah. And then like Major League Baseball, which you and I both adore, has done a great job and has looked at the aesthetic crisis in their sport and made some changes. And that sort of inspired me to think, well, what's the basketball equivalent of this? And to me, the corner three is the thing that we've arbitraged so much, and it's become so monotonous to me. Making that shot a little bit harder for these guys, it's time. And every other league, I'll end with this point, every other league, Tom, name another popular basketball league on planet Earth. They've moved their three-point line more recently than the NBA has. The one with the best shooters on planet Earth has kept their line in the same place for 40 years, except when they moved it in for 3 years. So they've kept it in the same place. And why? What have you been watching Brandon's client deform basketball in front of our eyes? It's time to address this thing once and for all, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay. Give me your two rule changes. Like corner three, you're getting rid of it, right? So you're extending the 3-point line to the sideline and also moving it back. Are those the two shifts that you would like to see?
Yeah, in Sprawl Ball, I wrote one that some people hate, some people love, which is letting teams draw their own 3-point lines. And I think just making it a little more uncomfortable and uniform around the league would make it interesting, depending on what game you're watching. If you're watching a game in Houston versus Boston versus Charlotte, the guys aren't so comfortable. That's one that a lot of people love and a lot of people hate. But the other one, I think, is just a pure arc, 23.75 feet. There's not enough shooting space in the corner. Too bad. Get over it. But the 3-point shot should be the same distance from every angle. What a concept. We can't widen the court, which is what a lot of people want to say, because the arenas are just too sort of set in stone. But in a world where we can't widen the court, we need a deeper 3-point shot, especially from the corners at very least.
All right, Brandon, respond. I want to hear your thoughts on how those things would change.
Well, listen, if it wasn't for the corner three, guys like me wouldn't have a place in basketball. So I'm a big corner three guy. My children are big corner three kids too. They knock them down at a pretty high rate, so I don't want that to go away. Well, no. So To me, what the corner threes do is it does force teams to defend 50 feet wide. And so as a coach defensively, the one thing that we tell our players all the time is we really only want to defend 35 by 25. We only want to defend 35 feet high, and we want to keep the ball on one side of the floor and defend 25 feet wide. What corner shooters do is it forces you to defend the width of the floor, and it opens up big gaps to drive in between. So the reason that we either want the basketball scored at the rim or shot from the perimeter is because of the rules. Number one, there's no defensive 3 seconds. If you want some of the mid-range to come back, you probably want to eliminate that rule, because right now, the reason that there are no unassisted mid-range shots being taken, the mid-range is always occupied defensively because there's no defensive 3 seconds. There's somebody that's always there. So you're not going to run action to get catches in places where the defense already is. So for me, if my rule changes, get rid of the defensive 3 second rule. I'm a big combination defense guy. I don't believe in playing man to man to man all the time. I believe on playing, to do things. I try to turn basketball players into thinkers. So I like zone defensive concepts. I like things that are confusing defensively. But for me, I do. The offensive coach in me loves the corner three because it does force teams to defend 50 feet wide. The defensive coach in me wouldn't mind the corner three being there if the defensive 3 second rule is taken away.
What if there was defensive 3 seconds or offensive 3 seconds for the corner three, so you couldn't stand for more than 3 seconds in the corner?
That's an interesting one right there.
We had that one in Sprawl Ball, I think. Yeah. And you have to 2.9 over there. And I don't know what that would look like. But these guys have it too easy. Here's my job. I stand in the corner, and if my man collapses in, I get, a 40% 3-point shot that I can shoot like a robot, 6 times a game. It's just, I don't know. I think and again, this was also my mission was sort of inspired in part by the All-Star game and Adam Silver's comments in February of this year, Tom, that we want to restore some balance to the NBA. And to me, the most imbalanced thing in basketball sort of economic geography is that shot being so hyper efficient. That's the easiest one to look at and be like, this thing is worth 1.2 points for a huge chunk of players. And a paint shot is worth less than that on average. So it's almost become the second paint. And I do think thinking like this 3 seconds, that's why there's no 3 seconds in the paint. It's an interesting concept.
What I'm thinking about is, does that mean that we lose defensive minded players because of the PJ Tuckers or whoever that has to stand in the corner to justify their offensive positioning? Does that mean that if we eliminate the corner three, what does that do for those defensive minded guys that are out there? I think, Kirk, you're probably going to say, well, then get better at offense. If you can't lean on that cheat code, you know what? Deal with the rest of us do and try to make yourself valuable offensively without that hack there.
Yeah, I think so. And I'll let Brandon chime in on this one. But, just shortening the length of the 3-point perimeter makes defense a little bit easier. And I think so shortening the amount of angular space available for the 3-point shot does make perimeter defense an easier chore by a significant amount. I don't know if it changes much. I think Jaden McDaniels and Nickeil Alexander-Walker are going to be just fine. If we do this, Malik Beasley might be in trouble. But I think the 3-and-D role player, and again, I'd like to hear what Brandon would have to say. I think they'd be just fine, but they'd have to be able to shoot from a few different angles and maybe create some more of their 3-point shots on their own.
Yeah, I mean, you're always going to need guys that can defend on the ball. You're always going to need guys that can be physical defensively. You're always going to need guys that have great length that can affect different things. So, I mean, I think that they're safe. But the one thing I think that we have to realize with what's happening with the sport right now is we're now to the point to where this has trickled all the way down to 5th and 6th grade basketball. I mean, I have 2 basketball teams. I've got 2 sons. I've got seventh grade teams that are shooting the ball with ease from the NBA 3-point line like it's nothing now. My youngest son, Colin, shoots to that depth with no issue, but the teams that we're playing also shoot to that depth with no issue. It's simply that the skill and how we teach the game and how we work on the game has now adapted to perimeter shooting. So the shot is actually easier because the kids and the players coming up are better shooting the basketball than they've ever been. It's, we have the tools. We have things like the gun and Dr. Dish and things that get repetitive shot after shot after shot, where these kids are taking incredibly high volumes of shots from the perimeter. And so the floor is going to be stretched from now on because people are shooting it so much deeper and so much more effectively.
This is interesting because now what this push-pull is happening in the NBA is what I'm thinking about is injuries is like, how much does the spreading and the geometry of the floor and how much floor coverage each defender now, bigs have to cover so much more space now in 2024 because of the 3-point shot and because of Dame Lillard setting a high ball screen, not at the 3-point line, but at the half court line. It's changing the way it's real.
Yeah,
is the amount of distance that kids and pro basketball players have to cover in ways that, Kirk, when you're writing about Michael Jordan and the way the game used to be, it's totally foreign now. And how, it was 6 feet in a cloud of dust is how Pat Riley used to call it. Just like it would be a wrestling match at the rim. And now it's so spaced out. It feels like, okay, this might be better from a, I don't know, the spacing and how allowing guys with the ball to show their skills and their handles and operating in space and driving angles. But at what cost? I don't know who that question is to, but like physically are these bodies capable of having this spaced out game?
Well, I mean, I think that if we look at college football, how many people are asking for the I formation and wishbone football to come back now that we've gone to the spread? It's just the evolution of the sport, right? And so we have to change. And so I don't think anybody wants 10-6 football games coming back. I don't think anybody wants to see Nebraska run fullback up the middle, first down, second down, and then run option to the outside on third down. I know that everybody, I hear a lot of people clamoring for mid-range to come back, and you're not getting that toothpaste back in the tube. It's kind of gone, and so the game is adjusted. The skill set of the players has adjusted. Coaches are adjusting more and more. And I think the fans enjoy it. I think the majority of the fans enjoy it because it's an incredibly difficult thing to do, to hit these shots off the dribble, off the move. And it's awe-inspiring to see somebody that can do that while somebody's closing out on them. So I think that, the game's going to continue to evolve.
Brandon, let me bring it up to what happened last night, because I watched Dallas beat Oklahoma City on the road, and I watched Cleveland beat Boston on the road. And I think one of the things that both of those results had in common was the 3-point. It's just, and this is what Pop would say, Brandon. It's like basketball's just become who's going to make those threes. And if you want to know who won a game, and
you're correct.
And there's such a high variance there. Don't we want some more diversity in how you can win a basketball game? And I think that's somebody else's point. That's not necessarily my point. But as Tom describes, like I always used to say, you watch an old 80s game, it's like clowns in a taxi cab, like playing in the paint. But the chessboard is expanded, which is cool. And I'm in on pace and space. But I think the next phase of this thing, guys, is asking how analytics can create a better product, not just create an optimal offense. And I think one of the cool concepts there is, I don't want to just see, the Celtics were 8 of 35 or whatever it was. They lost. Oklahoma City couldn't make their threes down the stretch. They lost. Like, I want to see like Dirk hitting 7 14-footers in a row in the third quarter, or a post player, just Hakeem. Like, and I'm not going to say I want to go back to the I formation, because I do agree with your point. But what about diversity? And how do we create more ways to win a basketball game than just 3-point shooting?
Well, I think if you think right now, think about Shaq, Hakeem, Patrick Ewing, David Robinson. Think about what those guys would have done if they would have had one-on-one post matchups all the time, which is what they would have had if they were playing in today's era.
Or
they would be
Brandon, if they were allowed to run point. Like Shaq, like imagine Shaq like coming out of LSU if they looked at him like Giannis, you know, or looked at him like Jokic. Now we obviously know what he was as the bulldozer around the rim, right? The monster around the rim. But there is a version of Shaq that like way more athletic than anyone ever remembers him in a Lakers or Cavs or Boston uniform. Like early Shaq was Giannis and was bigger, stronger. So like how David Robinson might not have the handles of Jokic or whatever it is, but I always think about like, would the Hakeems, the Patrick Ewings, the Shaqs of the world, would you have treated them the same way as like maybe Embiid now, where he's operating in the high post or bringing the ball up the floor in ways that we never would have seen with Shaq?
It's hard to say because, you know, at the time when those guys came up, we didn't give them that option. Like you said, we didn't give them that option. And so now we are giving the big guys the option. But I'll tell you this is another thing that's kind of changing about the game. And it's starting at young ages and moving itself all the way through the NBA. Nobody wants to be a big man. Nobody even wants to be called a big man. Nobody wants to catch the basketball with their back to the basket, whether it's on the block, whether it's at the nail. No kid wants. Parents will tell you, and you'll hear parents complaining, my son's not a big. Even though he's the biggest kid on the floor by 6 inches, my son's not a big. We don't want him to be a big. Everybody wants to be on the perimeter. And part of that is the fault of guys like me, because everybody in the world is a basketball trainer now. Anybody that's got a damn YouTube channel or an Instagram account all of a sudden is an NBA trainer. It's amazing to me that we've got 400 NBA players, but we have 10,000 NBA trainers. If you check out their Instagram bios, by the way, you guys are math guys. You guys tell me how that works, because I haven't figured that one out yet. How we have that many trainers for so few players, but that's another topic for another day.
It's not adding up the math, Kirk. It's not adding up for me.
It's not. It doesn't work. But it seems like if you watched an NBA game, you're an NBA trainer now. But anyway, if so these kids, nobody wants to develop that skill set. Nobody, and the reality is, the skills are the same. Everything that Stephen and I do on the perimeter is what guys did around the basket years ago. And Steve Nash is the connection, because Steve Nash took what we took from Steve Nash is how he created to score around the basket. We took and we put it at the perimeter. And Steve Nash took that. So Steve Nash had very, very good footwork around the rim. So he was able to put shot blockers on one side of the rim or the other using footwork, ball handling, and ball fakes. And he was incredibly good, either scoring for himself or getting in the paint and creating opportunities for other people because of how he created space in tight areas. It's called short area quickness. He had incredible short area quickness. Stephen was a big Steve Nash fan, and I knew that. So we just looked at film of Steve Nash doing things around the basket. He was using side steps and step backs around the rim. I'm like, we're just going to do that out here. We're just going to do this from 30 feet. He's doing it from 3 feet. We're going to do it from 30 feet. So, the skills are the same. I don't know why there's this big pushback from players and parents, whether it be at the middle school, high school, or college level. I hear it all the time. Guys going in the transfer portal at North Carolina or Duke or other places. Well, I'm not a big. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. You're one of the bigger guys on the floor. You're a big. Now, that doesn't mean you got to go down there and be back to the basket, but you've got to be willing to catch the basketball with your back to the basket and score in the paint. And it's become a thing where if you're not driving the ball to the basket, for some reason it's looked down upon to be considered a big and catch the basketball. Rant over.
No, I love that. That was great. And now this is a natural transition to a topic that I know you both are thinking about a lot, is Victor Wembanyama. He's 7'5" ish, whatever you want to call it, 8 foot wingspan. Exactly what you're talking about, Brandon, is like, they don't want to be known as bigs. Well, here we have a 7'5" dude who's got an 8 foot wingspan who plays like Steph Curry out there. And who has handle and looks like KD. And KD doesn't want to be known as a 7 footer either. And I know you wrote this book before we could see Wemby as a rookie, right? But like, I feel like, Kirk, you're already formulating your next chapter about how Wemby's kind of breaking what we know about basketball. So Kirk, like, you worked for the Spurs, and obviously, you know, Wemby is kind of this new thing that Brandon and I have talked about before. I haven't talked about him with you, but like, what are you seeing when you see Victor Wembanyama, and with respect to like revolutionizing the game or innovating in the same way that Hoop Atlas, if there was another chapter, it might be about this guy?
Well, we get Wemby in the last chapter, and you're right on. The last chapter is sort of about the revenge of the girth, as I like to say. Big men are back, and we have already, now that Nikola Jokic has won his third MVP, we have 4 MVP awards going to centers in the 2020s. We haven't had a decade like that since the 70s, Tom. And I
tell that to the parents there, Brandon. Give that stat to the parents. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're all European players, and Europeans have been teaching bigs to face up and shoot much longer and pass than Americans have.
Say it again. They're all European players where they develop players correctly.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part. And Wemby, to me, is the logical extension of this Giannis, Embiid, Jokic, like sort of back to the future, revenge of the bigs meme, because he is longer than those dudes. He is more fluid than those dudes. He can dribble, pass, and shoot. He will put his back to the basket, as we've seen in San Antonio. He was one of the more active post-up players this year, but he still loves to face up. And some of his craziest highlights that we saw this year, guys, are when he uses 1 or 2 strides to cover the entire scoring area and get to a layup or a dunk that didn't look like it could be a layup or a dunk from when he jumped. But to me, ultimately, he fits right into the last chapter of the book. Mm-hmm. Bigs are back. And one of the more provocative questions I'll ask you guys is, if it's true that 6'11" and 6'10" and 7'3" guys can do this, what's the future for a 6'1" guy? What's the future for the Jalen Brunsons of the world? And right now they look like they're just fine. But in a world where there's Jokic's and Wembanyama's coming in from every corner of the globe, our short player is going to be in trouble again.
Well, I mean, the answer is yes, because the game is getting bigger. I mean, you look at what Minnesota has out there right now.
Great point.
Everybody's, what's wrong with Jamal Murray? There's nothing wrong with Jamal Murray. There's nowhere to go. Nowhere to go. Sideline to sideline, their combined length is just making things very, very difficult. And so, they don't necessarily all have to be 6'9", 6'10", but if you get a group of 6'7" out there that are all athletic, that can all defend, that can all put the ball on the ground, that can all shoot, that's a really big group from a combined length standpoint. So, but I think that, Kirk, you really nailed it right there with what you said in the very beginning. They're all European guys. This country we are so far away from where we need to be with how we develop our high-end talent here in the United States. We simply want to out-athlete people here. Mm-hmm. And you can only do that for so long. And it's not very difficult to look at the NBA draft, the NBA draft boards, who the young players are that are having success when they get to the league versus how many young American players are coming in and taking a little bit of time. From an IQ standpoint, from a work ethic standpoint, from a professionalism standpoint, and certainly from a skill standpoint, other countries are far, far ahead of us. We have, as a country, we have lived off the fact that we're just better. We're just bigger, we're stronger, we're just more athletic. And it's no longer working because they've all caught up to us from a skill standpoint. And now they're catching up to us from an athletic standpoint, and they're starting to kick our ass. And so,
thanks,
we
Obama.
have to change.
Am I right, Brandon? Thanks, Obama.
Mm-hmm.
We have to change how we do things from a grassroots standpoint in the United States to help our players continue to play well. And that's not like an Olympic thing, or that's just basketball. It's a global sport. And these guys that are big, that come in with this type of skill level that you're seeing is something we just don't have in the United States right now. Somebody asked me the other day if Joel Embiid can't go to the Olympics, who's going to be the big guy for the United States? And you kind of have to think for a minute. It doesn't just roll off the tip of your tongue. You kind of have to think, and it's never been that way in the past.
A funny anecdote, Tom. talking to JJ Redick, he wants to bring two of his sons there to Serbia. I don't know if he's serious, but to learn back. This is JJ Redick. He went to Duke. Yeah. He played in the NBA for 15 years, and he's like, maybe I should bring some of my kids over to Serbia to learn some of these things. It's just an inside out world.
Well, what is it? Yeah. What is it, Kirk? So like being with RC and Pop and the rest of the organization, like what is it about European academy basketball or European programs that is different?
Well, RC, he's taught me so much about this, but number one, a lot of those federations you have to be a certified coach. So Brandon's joke about how everybody's a trainer, that's not a joke over there. You have to be certified. You have to go through a training program and like a CPR certification to teach a jump shot. And then the other thing I would say is they play with a 24-second clock over there from a young age. They learn how to make quicker, smarter basketball decisions, both on ball and off ball. So they play a lot of 3-on-3 over there. Is something I've heard other coaches talk about. So I'm not quite ready to say they're building much better basketball players over there, but they're doing a few things a little smarter than us. And I think Brandon's on the front lines of that. And look, Brandon Payne's American. And I wrote the best chapter about basketball development in this book about a red-blooded American named Brandon Payne and a red-blooded American named Steph Curry, who, by the way, changed basketball with a freakish work ethic and smart AF practice regimen that doesn't exist in Europe either. So I'll be a little more patriotic because we're not dead here. Stephen is proof of that.
USA.
But you can't look at Luka. You can't look at SGA. You can't look at Jokic and not be like, what's going on? The first team All-NBA team is all foreign-born guys. Mm-hmm. What's going on? So there's something there. We're still pretty good at it, but I think we could be better.
Yeah, I am ready to say they're building better players. They are building better players. And some of it is they have actual thought process that goes into how they develop players. Their practice to play ratio is more appropriate than what we do here. Here on a weekend, you kids can play 4, 5, 6 basketball games. They didn't practice any during the week. So, yeah, we've got a lot of guys that go one-on-one. Yeah, we got a lot of guys that get to the basket. We got a lot of guys that can shoot it. But we don't have kids that can operate action. We don't have kids that can make plays for other players. We have an entire country full of players right now and I heard Jeremy Lin say this one time, and it was the most incredible, impactful thing about passers I've ever heard. There's 2 types of passers in basketball. There's the type of passer that exhausts all of his individual options before he decides to make a pass. And there's a type of passer that passes to create opportunities for his teammates and also create opportunities for himself. Every player in the United States right now is player number 1. They're all exhausting their individual option before they move the basketball. So they don't understand the concept of timing, screening, cutting, moving, because that's just not how they play. Everybody trains during the week. They don't practice during the week. They train. They got great dribbling. They go through all this incredible ball handling. They go through these great drills that some people took from me. All right. And so I'm part of the problem, but they don't practice enough, and they don't have, all those countries also have oversight. They have governing bodies that operate their grassroots development. Here in America, there's really no oversight. There's really no qualification for people to get involved in it, other than maybe you played at some point. And that's why we're struggling. And it is a struggle. On the circuits that we have now, we do see teams from Canada. We do see teams from Europe come here and play. And they might not beat American teams all the time just because of the physical disparity. But when you watch them play as a coach, you're like, man, these kids know how to play. They really operate their stuff. They can operate. They listen to their coach. There's a big difference.
Isn't it a paradox, though, that like European or I guess foreign NBA like bigs are just more skilled than ours. But in America, you're describing that everyone doesn't want to be a big, they want to be a guard. So wouldn't you think that all of the 6'10", 6'11", 7-foot American bigs would have these guard-like skills and be like Giannis or be like Jokic and be great passers or I guess dribblers and focal points of the offense? Isn't there a paradox that like if everyone wants to be a guard, then shouldn't we have some more 6'10", 6'11" Giannis's and Jokic
You
is
guys
out
just
there.
hit the nail on the head. I think it is. And Brandon, I want to hear what you have to say, but you guys, everybody wants to be Anthony Davis. Nobody wants to be Isaiah Hartenstein. And if you look at the rebounding leaders in the NBA, Tom, it's foreign. You got to go down like 7 names, and then you get Anthony Davis or whatever. But nobody wants to do that. Like the Nurkic, nobody wants to be the Bosnian beast in American basketball. Nobody wants to. Hey, bro, what did Kawhi say? Boardman gets paid. He had to say that for a reason. And I love Brandon's point about Jeremy Lin. I'm stealing that. It's such a profound point. But it feels like, I think the combination of that ethos, and nobody just wants to be big and strong and recognize that rebounds will get you paid. And that dirty work down there, especially on the defensive end of the court, is so vital. But it's a big problem for our Olympic program. If we didn't get Joel Embiid, that's obviously the weakness of our American basketball team is our front court, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's hard. It's extremely hard for players of that length to acquire that type of skill as well. And again, it takes a systematic, organized, and progressive thought process to how somebody with that length can acquire these micro skills to be good handling the basketball and shooting the basketball. It's not as easy as some of the European guys probably make you think it is. So, I mean, again, when you watch Wanyama warm up, when you watch him work out, there's a lot of thought process that has gone into that. There's some science that's gone into that. And then there's been buy-in from Victor himself, which is the big part. He's bought in, he's executing it, he's doing it, and he's kicking our ass.
Yeah, Brandon, when we did our pod on Wemby, I think that was like early in the season, but at end of season Wemby, what were you seeing?
I mean, just a guy that, I always tell rookies coming in the NBA, the first 82 games are 82 lessons. Some of them be positive. There's probably going to be a lot of negative. And what you are able to take away from the negative to learn from that really determines how much better you get from year 1 to year 2. The thing that I saw from him was an incredible ability to learn lessons rapidly and make changes quickly, which is really, really hard for young players to do in the NBA because there's so much happening. And it happens at such a fast pace. I'm not talking about the pace of the actual game. I'm talking about the fact that you play Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and you don't have a lot of time to stop and think. Mm-hmm. The fact that he was able to, if you watched him early in the year versus the end of the year and you're watching closely, you're seeing big differences. That's going to be a problem for a lot of basketball teams in the NBA for a long time if he continues to learn at that clip, because that's very Stephen Curry-like. Stephen learns at such a fast pace, and he's the type of guy where you show him something new, and he might look like a newborn deer for 2 or 3 reps, and he's falling all over himself. By the time he gets to the 3rd rep, he looks like he's been doing it his whole life. Victor Wembanyama looks like he has some of those same traits and same attributes. And it's at his size and his ability. And if he learns like that and he executes the way he did, they're going to be very, very good as soon as they give him a little bit of help.
Yeah, he's learning what the defense gave him and just learning how to play defense. And it reminds me of the line that Kirk, you repeated so much, echoing what Brandon said on the floor, is that the defender always gives us the answer. You guys are the defenders on this podcast. You gave me a lot of answers here, and I appreciate you guys spending your Friday morning riffing about the league, and appreciate you, Kirk, for writing this book. Gives me, someone who's studied the game, a lot to think about, and thinking about where this is going in the future, because the game didn't stop in 1998 with the shot, from Michael. It kept evolving, and there's going to be in 10, 20 years, we're going to look back at Steph Curry being like, man, that was just the start of something, he was ancient. Right. He was a dinosaur, that dude. So Hoop Atlas, go buy it, Amazon, wherever you get your books. Kirk Goldsberry, thanks so much. Brandon Payne, safe travels, you guys. Brandon, best of luck in training for Team USA, and Steph, and best of luck with you and all the teachings that you got to do. You got to revolutionize not just the modern NBA. You got to revolutionize the grassroots basketball.
We're trying hard.